Hello everyone, welcome to another video in Laravel interview preparation series. I'm Umesh Rana and you are watching Programming Fields. Today I have come up with a very basic coding example in which I will implement a CRUD operations using Laravel Eloquent ORM. So if you are new to Eloquent ORM in Laravel, then you can check out our previous video in Laravel interview preparation series. I will put that link in the description box in this I button also. So as of now in Laravel interview preparation playlist, we already covered some theoretical concept on Laravel Eloquent ORM and how does it work. So now it's time to execute those things in a practical way by creating a small application in Laravel in which we will cover CRUD operations. But before we dive in, let's get a quick overview of what CRUD is and understand the significance of effective database record management in web development. So the CRUD stands for create, read, update and delete. So this is the fundamental operations when dealing with databases in any server-side programming language or a scripting language. As we saw in the previous video, Laravel's Eloquent ORM is a very powerful and elegant tool that simplifies your database interactions in your Laravel applications. And it provides an active record implementation to work with your database table as if they were objects. The effective database record management is crucial for building dynamic and responsive web applications. It ensures that your application not only stores data efficiently, but also allows user to interact with that easily. So now we understood the fundamentals. Therefore, let's move on the setting up our Laravel project. So I'm on my laptop screen and here I have opened this terminal. So let me navigate to the project folder. And inside this project folder, I will create one Laravel application using Composer. So I already have Composer set up. If you don't have the Composer, then simply you can install it. However, you can go with Laravel installer as well if you have. So let me create one Laravel application using Composer command. Composer create project, prefer this Laravel, and here I will just give one application name, that is Todo app. Simply hit enter. And this will take a couple of seconds to create this project, and yes, project is created. So now let's open this project in VS Code editor. So navigate to the project folder, Todo app, and here I will open it in VS Code editor. Okay, so the project is opened in VS Code editor. So at very first step, you will have to set up our database connection. So inside this .env file, you can see here we will have to configure our database. So let's create the database for this application. So navigate to browser, and here I have PHP my admin. So I will create database using this. So here I will provide database name, that is Todo app. Yeah, so the database is created. Now come to the project folder, and here we'll have to configure that database. Okay, so the DB configuration is done. Now in the next step, we required a model, migration and controller for implementing CRUD operations. So let's switch back to terminal, and now we will create model, migration and controller using a single command. So the command is php artisan make model, and here we will have to specify the model name. So I will provide the model name as Todo. Okay, if you will hit enter, then it will create model file. But along with model, if you want to create migration and controller together using a single command, then you will have to pass one flag. So this M indicates for migration. If you will hit enter, then it will generate two files, that is model and migration. But if you want to create a controller as well, then after this M, you can simply pass C. So here M stands for migration and C stands for controller. Alright, so if you will hit enter now, it will generate three files. The first file is model, second one is migration, and the last one is controller. Okay, so now we have migrations and model ready. If you will navigate to the database migrations folder, then here you will able to see this Todos migration. So inside this Todos migration, we will specify few columns, that is table, string, and we will provide Todo name. This can be nullable, and similarly we required description. Okay, and this can be nullable as well. At last we can have one boolean field, that is completed. So we will maintain one status and the default will be false. So after specifying the schema in the Todos migration table, you will have to navigate to the models, and inside this Todo model you will have to define fillable property. Okay, so you will have to define protected fillable array, and inside this array you need to specify those columns for which we will be inserting values through Eloquent. So we have created name, description, and is completed flag. Alright, so this is done. Okay, so now in the next step, you will have to migrate this schema so that this table will be created into our database. So now let's come to the terminal and hit enter PHP artisan migrate. Alright, so this generated our tables. Okay, so we have now to-dos table. If we'll come to the database, if we'll refresh, you can see this to-dos table is created. So we have this to-dos table ready. So now we will be working on form design in order to create to-do list. So let's switch back to VS Code editor, and here inside this resources folder we will have this views folder. So what we will do, we will create a new folder, that is to-dos. Alright, and inside this to-dos folder I will create a new blade file. So we will create.blade.php. Alright, so basically this create.blade.php file will contain one form in which we will have some input fields. Through that we will create to-do list. So here for designing purpose we will be using Bootstrap. So in order to use Bootstrap, what we will do, we will create a separate master layout that we already discussed in our previous video. So we will create a master blade, and that master blade will be extended in further all rest of views. Okay, so just outside this to-dos folder I will create one master blade. So here it will come inside this views. This will be master.blade.php. Okay, so this master.blade.php file will contain the basic skeleton of HTML having Bootstrap, CSS and JavaScript. Okay, so I will import it using this shortcode because I already have this Bootstrap 5 snippet. Okay, so let me just modify this to title like Laravel CRUD application, and here I will just alright, so here you can see this Bootstrap 5 CDN is already imported, and also we have this popper.js and bootstrap.js. That's fine. So as of now I don't require this header. I will just remove this, and also this footer is not required. Okay, so this is cleaned now. So instead of this main I will just create one div class container. Alright, and here I will just use yield that we already discussed in our previous video. So here I will just specify yield content. Alright, now let's switch back to create.blade.php file, and here at this very top I will just extend that master layout. Okay, now in order to create some form, what we will do here, we will use that section content, and there will be end block of this end section. So in between this section I will create one Bootstrap form. So let's write this form, and here I will create one row, and inside that row I will create one column. So let's create this. Okay, and here I will use this card component, and inside this card we will have this card header and card body. Okay, at last we can create card footer. Okay, so in this card header I will just create one heading that will have card title, and the title will be create to do. Now inside this card body I will create one label, and this will be for title. I will specify that to title, and I will just define a required asterisk mark, and here I will just create text danger class. So now we will have input field, input type will have text, name will be title, we will have class as form control, and we can define id attribute as well, title. Also there will be placeholder, this will be to do title, and we can wrap this label and input text in a form group. So this class will be form group, and we can just put margin bottom of 2. Okay, and here this will be closing div. Now simply copy and paste this 2 times. Okay, and here this will be description. Okay, and instead of this input type, here I will use one text area. Okay, now let me change this to description to do description, and instead of self closing there will be separate text area closing. Okay, and at last here I will have one button, but I want this button in card footer. So here I will just create button type as submit, and this class will have btn success, and this button title will be create here. So this form is ready. So now in order to render this blade file, we have to create one function, and we already created controller. Inside this controllers folder we have this to do controller, but as of now this controller is empty. So we will create one function, public function create, and inside this create function I will return that view. View name is create, but this view is inside this to-dos folder. Okay, so path will be todos.create. That's it. Now we have to execute this create function. So in order to execute this create function, you required one route. So come back to routes folder, and inside this we have this web.php file. So here you need to create one get route colon get, and inside this I will define endpoint as create, and inside this array block you need to define that controller name colon class, and then that function name. Now this controller should be imported here. So let's define use app http controllers and that controller name. So now let's start our application first. So run this command php artisan serve. Alright, so this application is started on 8000 port. Now let's switch back to browser, and here let's access that localhost 8000/create. Okay, so you can see this form is created, but this form has not centered align. Okay, so let's add that. Yeah, so here we can add this class as auto. So this will be margin auto. Now switch back to form, and if you refresh, yeah, this has center align. Also we can give some margin from top. Okay, here we can just pass class as margin y of 4. Yeah, and also we can just pass shadow class to card. Okay, so come back to browser and refresh. Yeah, so it's almost okay now. So as of now this form is not functioning, so we have to make this form as functioning. So whenever we will submit this form, this should submit this to do title and description, and these two fields should be saved in our database table. So now let's come to the code editor, and here we will define form action. So here we have to define some endpoint on which this form will be submitted. All right, so I will just define some route as todos.store, and this method will be post. Now this endpoint should be created in this web.php. So simply duplicate this route, and here this method will be post, and this should be store, and here this should trigger a store function. And also we have to define name just like todos.store, because we have called this route function, and inside this route function I have used this endpoint name as todos.store. So this is basically referring to this named attribute, because that route function will locate at this name attribute. Now come to the controller, and here we'll have to create one function, public function store. Okay, and this store function is basically a post request, and that is expecting kind of request that should be submitted through form or postman kind of thing. Let's put dd here in order to just display this entire request. So now we have missed one thing inside this form. So whenever this form will be submitted, this will expect one CSRF token. So basically this CSRF token will pass one token field that will be input type hidden basically, and that token will be passed inside this form request, and that CSRF token will validate that form request is coming through Laravel application. Alright, so without CSRF token it won't allow you to submit this form in the post request. For example, let's come to the browser. Let me remove this query params. I will refresh, and if I will submit here, you can see this thrown page expired. So this page expired means this is expecting one token that should be passed from home. Now come to the VS Code editor, and inside this form, here you need to define this CSRF directive. So just save it, come back to browser, refresh it, and now let me just inspect this. And if we will hover over here, So inside this form, you can see there is one input type hidden and that name is token, and this generated one value. So every time when you submit this form, this token will be submitted to the controller. So from this client side, this token will be passed to the server side, and that server side, this token will be validated automatically. So based on this validation, this will allow you to submit this form. So if you will submit here, and you can see this token, title and description is coming in this form request. So now let's create some basic validation for this title and description. Okay, so come back to code editor. Now we will create a basic validation rule in order to validate this to do title and description. So whenever you will submit this form, this will trigger one required field validation. All right, so let me just remove this line, and here I will just write $this validate, and inside this I will pass this request object, and inside this array we have to define the field's name just like title, and here we will define this validation rule. So I want this title to be required, so here I have defined title as required, and also we can just pass min or max attribute kind of thing. I want this to do title minimum to be 4 characters, and now next field we have description, and this should be required and it should be minimum 4. Okay, and in this to do title I want max to be 50. All right, now let's come to the browser, refresh it, and if you will submit here, nothing happened. Yes, so this validation is triggered here, and now we have to capture this validation error response in this blade file. So switch back to code editor, and inside this create.blade.php file, let me just dock this. Just after this title input field, here I will capture this error directive, and if error has title, then I will simply display that error message just like this, and this should be end error, and I want this error message in red color, so this will be text danger class in Bootstrap. So I will copy this, and similarly I will add it for description also. So here I will replace this with description, and yes, now let's come to the browser, refresh it and submit. So now you can see the validation error response is captured in the form. Okay, that's fine for now. So now if I will try to submit after filling up this to do form, just like Laravel to do app testing description, if I will submit, yeah, here the form is submitted but nothing displayed. Yes, because we have not handled the form submission event as of now. Okay, so let's come to the editor. So now we will be inserting this to do list in our database table. So we already have created this to do model, so we will be using this model Eloquent in order to perform database operation. So here we will call this to do model, and the Laravel provides model create function, and this create function will take array that will contain form request as of now. So we have defined a named attribute just like name for to do title. So here this will have name, and the parameter will come from request, and this will be title. And now same thing for the description. So the model Eloquent will return the created record in the form of object when it is created, because we have used this create function. So we need to capture this here in one variable. Let's see, this is $todo, and before that we have to import this to do model at this top. Use app models and then to do. Come to the browser. All right, so now if I will submit this, then we can see this returned to do object, and this returned created record here. So if we will switch back to database, if you will refresh it, you will be able to see this to do list. Now from here we will have to return this response to our blade file. So here we will be using this flash message that Laravel provides to display any flash message using session. So here I will just write one if condition, just like if to do is created, then I will just simply return back with success, and here I will just define to do created successfully, else it will return back with error, and here unable to create to do. So this is done. Now in this create blade file we will have to capture this success response. So let's come to this top, and here just above this card component I will use simply bootstrap alert component. So I will simply write div class alert, and I will write one if else condition, and I will use this Laravel session function. If session has success, then I will simply call this alert, and I will pass class just like alert success, and inside this alert component I will display that session message. So session success. All right, and this should be wrapped in curly braces. Now we will create one else if. So let's see if there will be error. So I will just write session error, then simply I will call this component again and I will write this end if statement, and this alert will have alert danger, and here I will capture this alert error. Alright, so yeah, this is done. Now switch back to browser again. Let me go back. If I will refresh it, I will create another to do list new, and then description test. Let me create it. So yes, this returned flash message with to do created successfully. So now in the next step, we will have to display the created to-dos in a new blade file. So for that, we will create a new blade file inside this to-dos folder. So I will simply create this as index.blade.php file. And again, I will extend that master layout here. So I will write this extends master and then section, and this section will have key as content, and again there will be end section. Now in between this section, this time I will create one tabular architecture. In that table I will display list of to-dos. So I will just create one div, will have class table responsive. So I'm using bootstrap, so I will have to use this bootstrap classes. Now this will have table class table, and I will use table stripe. All right, and then there will be t head. After that there will be t body. Yeah, and inside this t head I will define th. So I want first thing like to do id. All right, and the next column that I want to display is to do title. All right, and the next one will be description, and the last one I want action. So in that action I will define view, edit and delete option. All right, so this t head is created. Now inside this t body, here we have to render this list of to-dos. So initially what I will have to do, I will have to render this blade file inside this to-do controller. So for that I will create a function named public function index. All right, and from here I will fetch the list of created to-dos, and that will be returned to the view, and in that view we will capture the list of to-dos here inside this table architecture. So again I will use this Eloquent model, that is to do. Eloquent model provides function named all. Okay, so this all function will return list of all to-dos available in this table. So instead of this all, Laravel provides get function, so you can use that as well. So now we will have to capture this in one variable, that is to-dos, and here I will have to return this on a view. So firstly I will call that blade file, that is todos.index, and inside this compact function I will pass that to-dos variable. Okay, that is done. So now switch back to index blade, and here I will have to iterate using for each loop. So Laravel provides for else loop as well, so that we already discussed in our previous video, in which we already discussed view and Laravel available directives. So here I will be using this for else loop. All right, inside this for else loop I will just pass that to-dos that we already returned from to do controller, that is coming from here, and this will be as to do, and inside this for else block I will just move this tr, and then inside this td I will simply extract this to do id, and I will just duplicate it multiple times, and there will be to do name, and the last will be description. All right, and at last I will create some buttons here. So let's say btn info, and this will be for view. All right, now let me just duplicate it, and this will be for success and for edit, and at last this will be for delete. So I want this button in danger. Yeah, so this is done, and now in this empty block I will simply create one empty tr that will have td, and this will have call a span as yeah, and I will simply write text danger no to do found. So this is done. Now in order to execute this index function, again you will have to navigate to the web.php file, and you will have to create one route. So instead of creating separate route and using multiple controller parameter, what we can do, we can wrap it in a group of controller. So Laravel provides one feature in that you can just make a group of controllers for multiple routes. Okay, so here what I will do, I will create one route and then controller. All right, and inside this I will call this to do controller : class, and then we'll have group, and here I will create anonymous function. All right, and inside this anonymous function I will simply move these two routes, and now we don't require this to do controller every time to be written here. So I will remove that and simply I will call those functions only, just like this. Here we can define name just like todos.create. Yeah, so this is more optimized and clean code. Just to render index function that we have created inside this to do controller, again we will have to create one route. So here I will just create one route as slash, and this will call our index function, and I will give one name as todos.index. Now switch back to browser, and here let me navigate to the index route. So you can see we have this list of to-dos, but here we can't see description. Let me check this code. Okay, so switch back to index blade. Oh yeah, so here we have this typo mistake. Okay, so let's correct it. Description, if we refresh it, yes, so now you can see we have this list of to-dos, and now we want here one create button to be displayed at this top, so that we can redirect to the create to do form from here. Okay, let's add that button. So that button will be added here just above this table. So I will just add row. All right, and there will be one column of 12, and I will just write link create to do, and I will define that route as todos.create, and here I will just pass one btn class as btn primary, and I will just give some margin from top and bottom. That is fine. Now let's refresh it. Okay, so we have this create to do button, and let me just float this to right. So I will write this to text end. Yeah, this is fine. I want this margin from top forward. Yeah, this is fine. So whenever I will click on this button, it will redirect to this create to do form. Yeah, this is fine. And from here we will create to do, and I want this redirection on this index page. Currently we have redirected that to the same view with the success and error response. So what I will do, instead of return back, I will use return redirect route with, so inside this I will simply pass todos.index route. Okay, and I will simply copy and paste it here. Yeah, that's fine. Now let's refresh it, and here I will create another to do, Laravel Eloquent ORM, Laravel Eloquent ORM description. All right, let me create it, and yes, this created to do and it returned to the to-dos listing, but we could not see that success response here. Okay, because we created that alert component in create blade. So instead of that create blade, we want that alert component here in this to-dos listing blade. So let's switch to code. So here I will just cut it, this alert component, from this create blade, and I will just add it inside this index blade. Okay, so here I will simply create one more column with column 6 length, and I will just change this to column xl6, and here I will just paste that. Yeah, that's cool now. Okay, I come to the browser, refresh it. I will create another to do, Laravel migration tutorial. Let's create it, and yes, we got the success response. Alright, so now we will be working on these actions button, which are view, edit and delete. So let's work on view first. So switch back to editor, and here inside this index blade I will simply pass one route that will be todos.show, and this endpoint will take one parameter I will pass as to do id. Okay, and same thing will come here for edit, and this will be todos.edit. Regarding this delete, I will come to this later. Now these two endpoints should be created inside this web.php file. So here we will have to define get route that will work as show, and that will contain parameter as id. Yeah, now let's duplicate it, and this will be for edit. Yeah, this is fine. Now let's create these two functions inside to do controller. So let's create it, public function show. So as we passed one parameter as ID from this route endpoint. So we have to capture that inside this show function. So what we can do, we can define that ID here. Now I will just find this ID in our to do table. Let me use this find function and it will return $to do. Okay, let me just switch back to browser, refresh it. If we'll click on view, this return to do list with ID 1. So now we have to create another view in which we will display this to do. So again, I will create one view that will be show.blade.php. I will simply duplicate this create component and add it here, and we don't require this form because we will be simply displaying the to do, and yeah, this will be to do details. Okay, yeah, and this validation thing is not required. Let me remove this. Also, this submit button is not required. So instead of the submit, we will simply change this to anchor button, and this will be redirected to todos.index, and I will simply write as back, and this will be btn secondary. This is fine. Okay, so now we will have to populate the value that will be coming from this to do controller function. So initially what we'll have to do, just write return view, and this will be todos dot show. Again, you will have to use compact, and then you need to pass to do. All right, let me remove this. This is fine. Now come to this show.blade file, and here we'll have to map the values which are coming from this to do controller. So inside this value attribute, I will map simply to do name. Okay, and same thing for description, that will be to do description. Now let's check this result. Okay, so let me refresh it. Simply I'll click on view. Okay, so I guess we have not closed this anchor tag properly. Yeah, this is fine. Let me refresh it. This is fine. Now we will have to make these two fields as disabled or read only. So let's change that to read only. If you'll refresh it, yeah, read only, or simply you can use disabled property as well, just like this, disabled. If you refresh it, yeah, this is fine. Now let's work on edit part. So in order to edit any to do, you will have to redirect that to do details to a form. All right, so from that form, again we can update that to do list. So in order to achieve that, either you can use the same create form, or you can create a new form just to update that to do list. So as of now, I will be creating a different view, just like edit.blade.php, and I will replicate the same architecture just like this. Okay, and here this time this route endpoint will be different, just like todos.update, and this form method will be post, but this route endpoint method will be put. So HTML form does not support put method directly, but Laravel allows this update function to be passed in put request. So Laravel provides another directive as method, and this method directive will allow this put and delete request that we will see in the next step. And here we will change this title to update to do. Also this button will be changed to update. Yeah, this is fine. Now come to this web.php route, and we will create one route endpoint as a route ::put, and here we'll pass update. Okay, and one more thing, this put request required one ID attribute, so based on that it can update that particular to-do list. So we can define this name attribute as well for this route endpoint as todos.update. Yeah, this is fine. And from this edit blade, I will have to pass this like to do ID. So we will have to create two functions, just like we created for show and now for edit. So this will be public function edit, and here again you will have to receive that ID. We will replicate the same two lines just like this, and instead of this todos.show, I will just call todos.edit, and same thing, this to do will be passed from this controller, and same thing, this to do will be passed through compact. So let's refresh it, click on edit. Now we have to map the to do title and description inside this edit form. We will have to render those values like to do title. Okay, and just for this description, to do description. All right, now let's refresh it. Oh, okay, to do title. Yeah, instead of title we have name attribute. Just to refresh it. Yes, so now when we'll click on update, we have to define that update function, because we already defined that update method in this web route. So let's switch back to controller, and and here we will create one function as public function update, and this will contain two argument just like request, and there will be one ID. So the request will contain form request, and this ID will contain that particular to do ID for which we are going to update to do. So while updating, you will have to again find that to do first. If that to do exists, then we'll have to set name attribute with updated to do. This is basically model Eloquent approach, so that this will directly update this to do object, and again we will save this. So I will just copy this description. Okay, and one more thing, for just completion status, we required that flag as well, just like each completed $request completed. Okay, and at last we have to call this to do model Eloquent save function, and after that we will just redirect to index page. So there will be to do dot index with success, and here we'll have message to do updated successfully. This is fine. And just for this else part, if that to do does not exist, then we can return that with error unable to update to do. Okay, so in order to capture this completed flag, we'll have to modify this edit blade just by adding one more field that will be a drop down. So let me just copy this section. Okay, and I will just change this to completed, and instead of this input field, I will create one select class form select, and this form select will have option just like select status. Okay, and then we will have completed ending, and that value will be completed for 1 and 0. Okay, and for this validation we'll have to define completed. Okay, now while updating we have to validate that request as well. So again we will have to copy this validation rule and add it just like this. And currently we have added a new attribute, so for that we'll have to add that validation rule. It's like completed, and this is just required. So now let's come to the browser, refresh it. Okay, so initial value should be 0 because that value is coming from this database, which completed flag is 0. That value should be mapped with this drop down option. Let's come to the code again, and here we will have to make selected that value. Okay, I will simply check with to completed equals 1, then I will just make this to selected, and the same thing for this 0. If this to do completed the status is 0, then this pending will be selected, and by default I will make this to selected and disabled. By default there won't be any value, just like this. This is done. Now let's refresh it. You can see by default this pending is selected. So now if you will submit this form, then this validation is triggered. All right, so now let's add this name attribute in the drop down field. So come to the editor, and here we'll have to pass that name attribute as completed because we have added this validation rule as completed, and ID will be a completed as well. Now let's refresh it, and let's change this to completed, update, and yes, this to do is completed. So we can display that column completed flag here, so that we will be able to know which to do is completed and which one is pending. Okay, so now let's add one more column inside this index blade. So after this description I will simply put completed. Okay, and here again we'll have to add one more field, today is completed, but I want this value to be displayed in yes or no format based on this value 1 and 0. I will have to simply render this based on condition. So I will check if to do is completed, then I will display as yes, else no. So I have used this ternary operator here. Now let's refresh it. You can see this completed flag yes is coming for this first to do only. Now let's change this third to do. Let's update this to completed, and yes, this is fine. So we have completed this to do create, view, and edit functionality as of now. Now at last we have this delete option. So I want, like, when I will click on this delete button, so this will ask for one confirmation, do you want to really delete this to do? So based on that confirmation alert, that to do will be deleted. So let's implement that. Inside this to-dos list, we have this delete button. So I want this delete button to be wrapped in a form so that I can trigger one submit event. Based on that click function, I will simply fire one JavaScript alert. Okay, so let's wrap these buttons in form, just like form, and I will have to define that form action route just like todos dot destroy, and that form method will be post, and here I will just close this form, and instead of this anchor tag I want this and in the form of button type as submit, so that on click on this submit button I want to fire this form action to this specific route. Let's close this button tag. Yes, so now when I will click on the submit button, I want one JavaScript click event, and here it will just open one confirm dialog, and here inside that I will just pass one message just like are you sure. Okay, and we have defined this form that requires a CSRF token. All right, and this todos destroy route endpoint should be defined in the delete request, so we have to make this form method to delete instead of this post. Okay, so again for that we will have to use that Laravel directive method, and here we'll have to pass this delete. So this is done. So now let's create one more route delete, and here we will create one function destroy, and that function will take id attribute, so that based on that id that to do will be deleted. And again we'll have to define one function destroy, and we can pass that name attribute let's like todos dot destroy. So firstly let's pass this id attribute from this to do form action just like to do and id, and now come to this controller, and here we will define one function destroy. And inside this destroy function again we will have to capture this id, and based on that again we will have to find this to do. Yes, so let's pass this id again, and if that to do exists then we will use delete function provided by Laravel Eloquent just like this, and on successful delete I want to return this request again to the to-dos list. So I will write return redirect route to todos.index with success, and the message will be to do deleted successfully. All right, if that to do does not exist then I'll have to return back with error unable to delete to do. Okay, now let's come to the browser, refresh it. So if I'll click on this third to do delete action, yeah, it prompt are you sure. If I will cancel, yeah, it closed the request. Now let's try again. If I will click on OK, then this triggered delete request and that to do is deleted. All right.